today we got Ignacio Esteban on the show as
Okay.
recently retired ATF agent and started off in customs, and he
That's
has
right.
over 40 books available on Amazon, and just he's a bit of an expert on the mob, from everything to 1% of biker gangs and every drug cartels, everything in between.
Yeah, we have some good conversation. Let's see how long we can go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us where exactly you're from?
Yeah, exactly. Originally born in Los Angeles, raised in South Florida, in Miami. I started. It was really by accident how I really got into law. I had studied political science and history, and I was at FIU, which is in Miami, Florida National University, and I was studying international relations. And I was going to go to law school, and I saw there's some openings for customs, right? To be a customs official, and they were looking for Spanish speakers who understood Latin American culture. And I figured, wow, instead of going to debt, in law school, which is quite expensive. I mean, back then, you're still looking about another 20, 30,000, getting more debt. I said I could start making some money with customs. So I went through the process. I got picked up, and it worked out well. I was there for 5 years. At the time, it was during the part of the Department of Treasury. Later, it would change and merge with Border Patrol under DHS, Department of Homeland Security, after 9/11. By the time I was there, but during the 90s at Miami Airport, like I said, I was part of that set team, which is a contraband enforcement team, an elite team, and we were seizing probably the most amount of cocaine and heroin in the country. It was in Miami. Think of Miami Vice and everything else. And this is before the Cali cartel really just collapsed. The Colombian cartels collapsed. I mean, the Mexicans took over, which will be later, and they will start bringing it in through the border, which would be a lot easier. Bringing all that drugs through there. By the time it was still coming in through the seaport, the airport. And they would get very creative. I mean, with some of these techniques, how they're bringing stuff in. I remember one big seizure we had, and they would use other countries too. It wasn't just straight up Colombia. They would use what they call other nations to try, fool you. But they were corrupt in the Caribbean. They were corrupt in, let's say Ecuador, for example. I remember this huge seizure from Guayaquil that came in right at MIA, and it was in grouper, right? These huge groupers. So you had the block of ice next to a block of kilo in each one. and it was like over 600 pounds, right? That was going to get ripped off. And that was never going to go to the wholesaler where it's supposed to be. So you had a lot of corruption going on there and ripping off. So I remember even one time we had we would get a lot of guys from different countries, customs officials, to visit us. We even had one guy from Australia, and I spent a day with him, talking to him and everything else. This is years ago, but I remember, real cool guy. And he was saying, man, it's amazing how much is coming in, but they had their fair share also coming in Australia, a lot of drugs coming in. So that's more of my custom experience. So being with customs, you meet a lot of different agents from around the country and different agencies. So my guys from FBI, DEA, ATF, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, etc. So you make a lot of contacts, and I was doing a lot of seizures at the border, which is still law enforcement, but I wanted to do better and bigger cases. And as an investigator, as an agent, you can take it to the next level. So and I talked about it in my book, in ATF Undercover, why I decided to do that. And so I put in for ATF, DEA, and other ones, but ATF was the fastest one picked. At the time, Customs wouldn't hire really from within. They were just taking people in because they wanted to deplete their forces they had at the border, at the airport. So that was even difficult. And not, I would try to stay with Customs. So, but I was still within Department of Treasury at the time. And ATF, for the audience to know, would go over to Department of Justice after 9/11. A lot of changes, a lot of things changed after 9/11. And so we went to DOJ. So I was able to start in Tampa. I got picked up, and that's why I started working a lot of cases, doing undercover work. And I started working with a lot of guys, and I developed a technique how to work undercover, and you learn from them, because that's the best way you learn from people. Obviously, you go to schools and everything else, but there's nothing like learning from the people who are doing the job themselves. And it helped that I was also Spanish speak. So I spoke Spanish, right? I didn't look like this, obviously. Yeah. I had long hair, I had a beard, I had an accent. You want to make yourself look, that you're not somebody who's going to be the police, right? Yeah. Anything but that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I worked with these guys, and I started getting really good at it, and I started making a lot of good cases, and then from there, I did about with ATF almost over 21 years. I did transfer then later to Miami, and I worked at Miami for a while also, and I did a lot of big cases out there. And most of the cases I did, you deal with repeat violent offenders. I deal with drug dealers, armed drug dealers, gang members, armed gang members, international firearms traffickers, domestic firearms traffickers, guys trying to do murder for hires. So all these violent cases and stuff like that. So that's the kind of work I did, and I became very good at it. I think I had over 99% success prosecution rate with my case, which was good. So, that's one thing with ATF for your audience, is that ATF works with a lot of the most violent criminals that we do. That's what we specialize in. Especially the trigger pullers, the home invaders. I did cases like that too, with home invaders, active home invaders who are looking to do a lick, armed robbery, of drug stash houses, right, and rip them off. So what kind of people are those, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most criminals like to look at soft targets, right? These guys didn't care. They would come in after. I don't care if cartel members are protecting that load and they're armed. We're crazy enough to go in there and try to take that from them.
That's crazy.
So you got to be careful. You're doing a lot of meetings. It's really complicated cases, and at the end, those kind of cases, you got to have a SWAT team to help take those guys down because they're armed and they're pumped up and they're ready to really get into. So
yeah,
those are kind of cool things. Yeah, you got to keep your wits about yourself. But those are the kind, and then with time, obviously, you come out of college because it takes time to acclimate yourself to that kind of culture and that kind of environment. You really got to get yourself into role and think about all the scenarios, what ifs, right? If this happens, you got to go all those in your head. What am I going to do next? What happens? I'm going to do here. So, and those are things that I kind of talk about in my book, which is a cool book, ATF Undercover. It's on Amazon. And it's not just about buying dope guns and dealing with bad guys too. I've said on other shows before, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I also talk about, some of the bad things that happen with ATF, some of the, I hate to say, waste, fraud, and abuse. I guess you see that everywhere. So it's kind of an interesting story. It's also about my personal life, which I think is fun. And then I retired, right? I retired just last year. I had promoted. Unlike some people who do a lot of undercover work, I was a little different because I was also the case agent. Some guys who travel, let's say cross country, from Florida, whatever, they go to California and they're gone for like 5-6 months. I had 2 young girls and I really couldn't do all that. So what I would do was I was local. I would work a lot in, Tampa, Orlando, Florida, mostly in Florida, South Florida. And I was the case agent, which was tough. Also did the property. So I also did my own workup, intel and stuff like that. So I wore a lot of hats. So once I'm done doing the undercover work, I become really good at doing a lot of reports and affidavits for search warrants, arrest warrants. You can do a lot of writing. Right. And I've been doing a lot of writing for a lot of years. And I enjoy being a detailed writer and I enjoy getting the facts in here. And I kind of translated that into, what I'm doing now, which I really like a lot. And I hope your audience likes too. Is I've done like 40 books and a lot of them, between fiction and nonfiction, mostly nonfiction. Obviously, you got my autobiography, but I also like to talk about organized crime, politics, corrupt government, tyrannies. My first book that I started last year in like November, that I published in December. These are short books, so your audience knows. I mean, they're more than I'll take a good hour and a half read. My autobiography is a little longer, but at least if you don't know something of a subject matter, it gives you an idea what to talk about. So, but the first one I started was not far from you guys, since you're in the Asian region there, dealing with China, the evil empire. And I know that's a big deal in Australia now. I can see that with the nuclear submarines. They're getting the U.S. and Britain is trying to supply. I know the French weren't too happy with that.
No, lost a lot of money on that.
Yeah, they did. But the U.S. took care of them with other deals, of what I heard and read about. They had a little thing of there. But, I know the Chinese, the communists, are not happy with Australia having nuclear submarines. But look what they're doing, all right?
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the Olympic kind of triggered me start writing more. Even though I had started dabbling in my autobiography a little bit, I actually finished that this year, and it was published in February. It took me a good 6 months. That's my longest one. I wanted to get it right. It's a lot of details in there, right? You want to make sure you get the facts, what happened, the people, and everything. So it's a lot of stuff, a lot of reports, and sometimes it's a little easier when you're dealing with politics or you're dealing with political figures to write about, or organized crime. You go back and you research them, and I've done it from the Italian mafia, the 1%ers, and I noticed Australia has some 1%. Hells Angels even have some chapters in Australia.
Yeah, we've got a lot of different ones here.
Yeah. So that it's interesting how organized crime, and I heard, I think one of the other shows you even have some dealing with La Cosa Nostra, right?
Yeah. And we had an Italian mafia here as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have a lot of stuff going on too. Not as big as we do, but and drug trafficking is big there. And another interesting book I wrote was on the Yakuza, which is the Japanese mafia. And that's kind of an interesting thing because I don't know if you guys have seen in streaming Tokyo Vice, which has been very popular here in the U.S., based on the story of an American beat reporter back in the 90s who was covering the Yakuza underworld during that time, right? So I kind of saw some of the previews and I saw how good the show was. So I decided to start doing my own research and did a little book on it. And they're pretty strong. I mean, even though they've weakened a lot in the last few years because the Japanese government has really cracked down on them, and it's pretty much made it illegal for any business owner to really deal with them.
Wow.
And so if you sell them a car or a phone or a house, they have heavy fines against not only the Yakuza guy, but also those who are business, who are dealing with it. So a lot of people, they become pariah, pretty much what I'm reading about. They become pariahs, and people don't want to deal with the Yakuza anymore. They used to have, I don't know how much your audience knows, they used to have that full body tattoos all the way up to their wrists and back of their to their ankles, and then they had sometimes the shortening of their fingers, especially the pinky finger, if they had some issues going on. But the newer generation knows that's a big problem. That's a big red flag with Japanese authorities. So there seems, what I'm reading and researching, which is interesting, they've had a lot of splits. The biggest one, the Yamaguchi gang clan, they've had a big split, and they become Kobe. So you're seeing that breaking apart with the different groups there. So I think the end of the Yakuza is among us, what it used to be, but it still is a fascinating read. And I can talk about your audience if you want also about a pretty cool case that happened with the Yakuza. They had, and this is a pretty cool undercover case. This is a case I wish I had done back when I was doing a lot of undercover work. This case was a 3-year investigation worked by the Department of Justice, right? And had a DA undercover that was dealing with a high-ranking Yakuza member, right, that was introduced to him, that was brokering deals. They wanted weapons for rebel groups in Burma, which is now called Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. And look how bad Sri Lanka is right now. I don't know if you saw that the president just resigned via email, and the country's in complete turmoil. So, they were having all these weapons. They were brokering deals. So they would have meetings around the world. They had one in Copenhagen. They have in Bangkok, and eventually they took these guys down in New York City. Just happened about a few months ago. So I was reading the criminal complaint, the arrest warrant, right, and the details of the case, which are pretty interesting. And one of the pictures, you have the DA undercover who has a recording, right? He has video, and you have the high-ranking Yakuza member who is a meeting in Copenhagen with other authorities, and he has a missile launcher perched on his shoulder, right? So if your audience wants to look that up, Yakuza member arrested in New York City in the Southern District of New York, you have a picture of this guy like this with a missile launcher talking about brokering not just surface-to-air missiles, but a cache of weapons that's unbelievable, from machine guns, assault rifle, millions of rounds of ammunition. I mean, huge order. This is a big deal to fund these rebels. So if they want to look at that, I think that's pretty cool. You get an idea for that case, especially you have that link with the Yakuza in Australia. I think you've had some issues out there, and they're big in the U.S. too. I mean, they expanded in Hawaii at one point. They were in California. Anywhere you have a bigger Asian population, New York City. In the DC area, they were getting pretty big. And then now, of course, things have shrunk and not what they used to be. And I would say the same thing, I would say with the Italian Mafia too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the Italian Mafia is nothing what it used to be either. I mean, they've been crushed with major federal RICO cases, racketeering cases in the United States.
Do you ever think they can come back from that, or is it done now? They're finished.
With the Mafia, no. The guys who are coming, they're done. What I'm seeing is and some of their stuff they were used to be doing gambling. A lot of it's legal now, right?
Yeah.
A lot of prohibition, all that went away. Marijuana is becoming legal now in almost every state. I'm not sure about Australia. Is that something that's going on in Australia too? Legalization of marijuana?
Yeah, I think it's happening, slowly coming through. But what happens to the old timers, who are doing, like, they're in jail for years, and then all this stuff's all of a sudden just becoming legal? Does anything happen with them?
The guys before, no, if it was violation, then it's obviously. But marijuana wasn't the big thing. The big thing they were a lot pushing with cocaine, heroin.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of them just the cartels, the ones who I do think, the one I see in my experience, who are really getting strong, even with all these big cases in the United States, and it might be the same in Australia, is the street gang.
Yep.
They just keep on, no matter how big the cases are, there's so many, and their flourish keep on getting larger. And I keep on saying that they're not getting weak, and the cartels, Mexican cartels, are only getting stronger too. And I've written that in my books, of the strengthening of the Mexican cartels and the weakening of the Mexican government. Lopez Obrador policy with the cartels has been disastrous. He's been really soft with cartel leadership. It's pretty much a hug for thugs type mentality, and the violence has not gone away in Mexico. It has gotten even worse than ever. Horror stories. I talk about in my books, the stuff. If you want to see how, and I talk about this, and I'm a very pro Second Amendment guy, how gun control doesn't work. You look at Mexico, where the cartels have everything they're looking for, right? Everything. I mean, Mexico has some of the strictest gun laws in the world, right? And the average person can't have anything, but they victimize and terrorize everybody because they have the money they have the resources, they have the power. So, when you have these gun-free areas, what you're pretty much saying is, you know what, come in and do what you want. That's how it works. And so that's why it doesn't work. People say, oh, California. We here in the United States, it's unfortunate we have the blue and the red, right? You see Democratic states and Republican states, and the Republican states are very pro Second Amendment, while they have all these strict gun laws. But that's where the gangs are really getting strong, is in Los Angeles, California. I mean, they just keep on blowing up and getting bigger. And Chicago, and people get more. You look at the horrors now in New York City. In the subway system, they want to strict and make it hard for you to carry weapons in the subway system, but people are being victimized more than ever. You just had a mass shooting a few months ago in the subway system. He was shooting, I think 37 people. No one died in this one, but you have 37 victims still, right? They were shot. That's crazy. And I wrote a heck of a book about mass shootings. That's kind of what my expertise there with ATF, some of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history, and dealing with what are the solutions. And here in the U.S., obviously Australia, I know you guys took a little bit different approach than we can, but we are of course a nation of 340 million.
Yeah.
So and you guys have 26 million around there.
Yeah,
in Australia.
Yeah, a lot smaller.
So I mean, you guys can do that. Well, it just doesn't work here in such a huge, large population like this. Especially we have such dangerous criminals. Unfortunately, that's a bigger problem for us. People, if you expect, and I said it before, the police to come and save. I mean, you got some badass home invaders coming in. You better be armed, because the police aren't going to be there for a while, right?
Yeah.
You got to be protect yourself and your family at all costs. And you have, you get the alarm systems. You're going to get the cameras like we all try to have. But not everybody has all that, right? And not everybody gets to live in a gated community, right? That's what you hope to have. You want to have the extra security, have the gated community. You want to have but a lot of people in Middle America, they don't have all. And if you're in the rural areas, that's even more dangerous, because you're not going to see local police for a while. And then you look at these school shootings, right, Thomas? I mean, I don't know if you've been seeing that's going on in America with some of these crazy school shootings.
Yeah, it's insane.
You got to hope. I mean, now all the schools have public resource officer, and you hope the ones that do show up want to do the job, because at Robb Elementary and another one in Parkland, 77 minutes before another, which was my old agency, Border Patrol, right, came in and did the job, because the local police were not doing. Okay, they're outgunned. I get it. The guys have rifles. They had handguns, but those poor kids had nothing. The teachers had nothing, right? It's horrible situation. So that's why I'm an advocate. After 9/11, and I've talked to this in other shows. The pilot had the option of being armed, because it wasn't enough air marshals on every plane, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we had force multiplier. When I flew, we would help, the pilots or the air marshals, just saying, hey, if there weren't any, you're it to help us out if something does happen. And that was a force multiplier they did having us out there, and we did the training for that, which was great. But some pilots who had the military, who had the background, wanted to do that stuff. So there's teachers like that, because there's nothing else. I think most teachers do care for their students. They love their students, right? And you see always the same horrible pictures where the teachers are shielding the student before they get executed by a crazy madman, right? Which is horrible. I think a lot of them who would have it would go in there and fight, because, for example, in Florida, in South Florida, there was Parkland, and that was another horrible mass shooting there. And unfortunately, the resource officer knew the guy had a rifle, he had a handgun. He didn't go in and challenge the guy inside, right? He told the guy to set a perimeter, and the guy's shooting people, and the teachers are jumping in, trying to tackle and grab the gun and getting killed, trying to save students' lives, right? And the guy's outside waiting while you're armed and you got something they have. So that's why I think it's just, even if you do have it, you have to have the right person. Yeah, it is scary, right? But that's where you do the training, and that's what you got. Those are some of the issues I talk about, write about, and and I know you can maybe tell me in Australia how different you guys took about that.
Yeah, well, we had like just like the one major mass shooting here, and pretty much they just changed it, like got rid of all the guns, brought in real strict gun laws. But since then we haven't had another mass shooting like that. But again, like you said, we got a lot smaller population and a lot less like, we still got gangs and stuff, but a lot less than what you have there, and a lot less severity, I guess you could say.
Right. But you can still have like handguns, right, in Australia?
Yeah, it's pretty strict to get a license for guns and stuff. Yeah, right. It's hard enough. They'll come to your house and check your gun safe and everything and make sure.
Really?
Yeah, you can't, like, you would never see anyone carrying a gun around the streets or anything.
So you don't have open carry policy. At
No.
least here in Virginia, you have a concealed weapon. You know, you carry certain areas concealed weapons where in case something does happen, you're ready to respond. It just seems like in the US, it just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It's just one case after another case after another case after another case. Even if it's a small one, that's like almost daily. But the
Yeah.
big ones, it's like months.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a history. You know, it's just the culture of the United States is a culture of frontier nation, similar to Australia. But the Second Amendment was really a big part of this country,
Yeah.
and which is the right to bear arms, right? And that's something where it's constitutionally. People, you know, some states make it a little more restrictive and other states a little more relaxed, but even the states are very restrictive. Gun violence, let's say Illinois or California, is still very high because again, lots of gangs, lots of violence, lots of criminals. So that's part of the problem with so going back to my point, I still think that the street gangs are just flourishing.
Yeah.
And what's the solution? I don't know what you guys are doing over there, but unless you get the new generation out of that culture, right? They're born into it. If you don't remove them from that, they're gonna be just like their father, their parents, or whoever. And
Just
that's
a
what they're going to learn.
cycle.
Or if they don't have parents, the street's going to run. So you got to get them out there. That's how you break the cycle. So those are the things that I address in my book about solution and how to deal with these guys. It's really bad. And of course, you know, if America didn't have such in the world, I'm not going to say just the U.S. had a huge drug addiction, right? The cartels would be out of the drug business.
Yeah.
But Americans are consuming a ton of that. It's an addiction out there, which we're having opioid addiction. I mean, you name it, it's being consumed. And if they don't address that, then the cycle won't stop either. Not sure how bad it is in Australia, but you know, the US, Europe, a lot of parts of the world are consuming a lot of this drugs coming from, you know, South America and from Mexico. Big problem.
Yeah, that's crazy. Do you think like it would have, with all these new street gangs and with how violent they are and out of control, it would have almost been better if the government hadn't have completely broken or, you know, gone so hard on the older school sort of like mafias and stuff? Like, were they keeping them in check before, or was this always going to happen?
I just think it's a different culture. I think the mafia, especially Italian mafia, they were dealing, yeah, there could have been butting heads with the drug side. But again, some of these guys were dealing with different kind of racketeering, right? And the street guys, different street culture. The mafia was a little different, and they didn't interact, but you know, they got hit hard. They've been pretty much decimated. And as much as you hit the street gangs, street cult, they still flourish, and the cartels power them. They work pretty much for the drug cartels, bringing the street soldiers, and they're brutal. I mean, they're brutal. And it's not just about, I mean, with the mafia, I talk about this in my book and I talk about this with other shows. The mafia was about business. If they had to take care of something, it was business related. It was a purpose. With the street gang, sometimes they want to be really ruthless and they want to set the tone that I can kill because we want. And MS-13 is a perfect example of Mara Salvatrucha 13. They were a I mean, now they're kind of mixed between Mexican and Salvadorian, but they started actually in the US. And for your audience to know, they were Salvadorian immigrants, and they were set up pretty much to protect other Salvadorians from other groups, ethnic groups, from exploiting them, extorting them, and hurting them, right? But eventually it evolved back in the early 80s, evolved to what it is today. And then a lot of mass deportation led to that spreading back in El Salvador, and they start terrorizing over there. There was a huge case, which was horrible, in LA County about a few years ago, where, and this is what it shows them. I mean, it's not about, hey, listen, you did me wrong on a drug deal or a gun deal, and I'm going now to teach you a lesson. No, they picked, like, they were at a national park in LA County, and they picked these poor people and they killed them because they could kill them. And they bought machetes and dismembered them, and they left them like that because, you know what, I want to set the tone. This is what we do. We terrorize. The Trump administration got so frustrated with them that they deemed them a terrorist group. That's how bad they were, because their motivation sometimes was to terrorize. It wasn't business oriented like the mafia, right? They had a purpose. Some of these guys, street gangs, they just, the part of their culture to get initiated is to kill. And sometimes they don't have a high bite count. They have to make up for it. Say, okay, see that couple over there? Go kill them and show me what a badass. Not because for any reason. No, because we need a body count. We need to show, hey, I killed 25 people. You've killed this many. That's the mindset you're dealing with. That's something you think about. And that's unfortunate here. I'm not sure you have that kind of culture in Australia, but that's kind of crazy. That's kind of craziness we have to deal with in America. That's why it's important. You know, even police officer off duty. It was a horrible story. A police officer out duty looking for a house in LA County with his girlfriend, got ambushed by gang members, right? He was in a shootout and he was killed. So it happens all the time. So you really got to be careful what you're doing, where you are. And you have to be armed. It's a different culture, different country. It's just too many guns. Remember, America manufactures the most guns in the world, and we consume the most guns. And you have European companies now who move to America now. You have Glock that used to be made in Austria. It's now made in Georgia. You had a 6 Hour that was made in Germany. That's now made in the Northeast. You had H&K that was made also in Europe. All these companies have come to America because there is so much being purchased here. It just makes sense. So you have all, and on top of that, all the guns are being imported also. So, you know, oh, I like a Russian AK-47s, or I like, so you like a certain type of variant. All right, it gets imported here. You like AR-15 styles? Well, we make the best in the world. So that's what you see in America. So it's no way with millions of guns. It's impossible. It's impossible for you. We're stuck in this culture where I think, this is my personal opinion, Tom, that I think it's going to be like Israel. I had a buddy of mine who's a former retired military, just came back from Israel, and because of the war with Palestinians and how much attacks going on, you're going to have one detectors everywhere. You're searching bags everywhere. Any business you have, because you have to, because it's getting to between the crazy we have to deal with. Because what we have here is a mental health country. We also have people here, and in all these cases, it's not normal to want to kill children.
No.
It's not normal to want to kill innocent people. You know, someone snaps in there. You know, you see case after case in Sandy Hook in Connecticut a few years ago. And the guy was never treated properly for his mental health issues, and mom really neglected, right? And if the audience knows the story, so he snaps, he gets her. She's a gun enthusiast, steals her weapons, right? So you can have all the gun laws you want, but people are stealing guns, right? So she's sleeping in her bed, and he pumps 4 rounds in her head while she sleeps, kills her, and then he goes to the school and kills all those innocent kids at the school. And then, but the one thing that some of these guys do, because they're cowards and they're not mentally well, is when confronted by law enforcement, he did commit suicide, he killed themselves in the head. So the lessons learned in America is you got to confront these guys quickly, because you can't let them 77 minutes like they happened in Robb Elementary and Uvalde Tech. Well, it's a free for all in the classroom, executing kids and everybody else. You got to go in quickly, because once you start shooting. And I talk about in my book that, I mean, I compared what happened in 1984. I studied 17 cases that happened, right, from 84 until Uvalde, Texas. And I gave my conclusion. And 2 numbers stood out: 77 minutes at the McDonald's in San Ysidro, California, which is near San Diego. Same time, length of time that law enforcement took to go finally in there and take care of this guy. His name was James Hubbardy. And 77 minutes to happen. The SWAT team and Border Patrol did the same thing. Both had 21 dead. So, and that was the worst mass shooting in U.S. history back in 84. It was such a bad thing that President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation because of it. In California, because of this incident, because there used to be open state about firearms, really shifted to the left. And they became, and a lot of people think that helped empower the criminal element a lot, because the criminals are going to do what they always do. They're going to get guns, right? And then there's a market for street guns. And that's one thing I've done. You know where they can get it. If you don't want to do a background check or go through the store, where are you going to get them? You're going to get them on the street, right? You can get them at other place online. You go online, you say, hey, I'm on Meat Guns, no questions asked. And it's like a bazaar of weaponry, cache of weapons being sold online. You go, right? You can see everybody else. You meet someone there. You don't have to think. Sometimes they check, hey, if you live in the state I live in. Sometimes they don't even check that. No questions asked. Here we go.
Yeah, so you can ban drug, people are still going to get them.
Drugs, guns, everything. Bad news. That's the unfortunate part of America. And the only solution I see it have to, like I said, fortify and protect, because the crazies and the bad guys aren't going away. Yeah. You can incarcerate, you can build as many prisons as you want. We just continually, unfortunately, you have to remove these people from this environment here. And that's why I saw the talent. They did a great job. I mean, obviously, I'm federal law enforcement, but some of these big cases, racketeering cases, really stuck it hard to the Italian mafia. The one percenters, ATF did a lot of cases was these guys. I know, Sonny Barger just passed away. We're talking about the Hells Angels. He used to be the head of the Hells Angels for many, many years. And side note here, if your audience wants to, I have another show, but it's on my Facebook page. I have a survey going on, and anybody can vote. And within a week or two, right now you have, it's a 1%er case: Sonny Barger, Hells Angel; Taco Bowman, he was from the head of the Outlaws; and Doc Cavazos on the Mongols. I'm going to write a book. Right now, Sonny Barger is winning. So if your audience wants to vote, they go to my Facebook page, find me Ignacio Esteban, and they can vote. And within a week or two, I'll make a decision, and I'll be probably making writing a short book, which is but I did a 1%er book, but I want to focus on the life of Sonny Barger. Fascinating guy, and he was like 30 years, 40 years the head of the Hells Angels. I mean, yeah, there's a legend in that world of the 1%ers in organized crime.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. I mean, top of the world. Many of these guys were taken down, but he was not. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
How about cases and everything else? That's one thing how it ends a lot for the guys, the mob bosses in the mafia, right? Either they're going to get executed by one of their own or rival, or they're going to get a lot of federal time on these big racketeering cases. And that's why being in the mafia, you have a bullseye on your back, right? It doesn't end well. It doesn't end well.
Yeah.
The ones that maybe retire, so as they say, retire, right, are the ones that get to low-ranking soldiers and disappear somewhere. Because if you're in the top tier, it doesn't end well. You're a target by the feds or rival or within your own rank who wants to climb it up. And you might be seeing the same thing maybe in Australia, maybe with some assassinations and killings and stuff like that. But it was pretty big back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, And of course, you go even farther back, you have the craziness, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, and those guys. It's nuts.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you with, the appeal of like someone wanting to be a boss in the mafia, like you either go to jail or you get killed. Like, I don't understand that. Does each person think, oh no, I'm going to be smarter than the last guy, I'm going to survive, I want this?
Doesn't anybody think that, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do better than the last guy. I got him killed. Let me say, you were part of Gotti, for example, right? He became the head of the Gambino family because he helped kill Castellano.
Yeah.
He was pretty much who called the shots, Sammy the Bull, and you see them a lot on the shows and else. But look how handy for Gotti. He died in a federal prison.
Yeah.
Right. The other guy, he seems like he's doing okay for himself, but he was in witness protection for a while.
Yeah.
He's doing all those shows and writing books and everything else, but that's not the way it ends for a lot of guys. It doesn't end that way. It ends up being, you see, look at one of the famous deaths is, of course, Al Capone. He suffered a lot. He was in Alcatraz. He got sick, dementia. He had all these bad things, syphilis. His whole life, really, he was the head of, he became public enemy number one.
Yeah.
He was the original public enemy number one, right? After the Valentine's Day massacre, when they posed at cops and they shot some of the rival gangs, and that was it. I love history, so I wrote a book about crime bosses, and I did a little diving into it. And pretty much after that, it was the president said he started the Untouchable because the corruption was so big. And that was my predecessor, Elliot Ness, was Bureau of Prohibition that became later ATF. So I always thought that was pretty cool. These guys. And you need people and had to bring outsiders. And at the end, how did they get Capone? They didn't get it for murder.
Yeah, tax
evasion.
Yeah.
Tax. Yeah.
Crazy.
You had to put your case together. Yeah, that's how they got those guys. So, and he got 10 years, 12 years, and he got really sick, but he was done. So you were top of the world one day, right? 10 years. He ran the outfit, right? Chicago outfit up there. And then at the end, that's how it turns out for these guys. But I guess they come from, this background where they really didn't have strong foundation. This is how it turns out for them because they think the street's the way to do something. That's not, because their lives get destroyed. I did see his house that he bought in Miami was on the water so recently, and it sold very well. So people are interested in that kind of history.
I've seen something.
I see the fascination. People are fascinated by it. You notice that? Organized crime and history. I mean, on my side, I see it, as criminals, right? But there's some people that are fascinated. I guess they think there's something glamorous to it, but at the end, they're killers, right?
Yeah.
They're thugs. That's what they're doing. So I'm on the other fence, and I do a lot of shows, and I've talked to people who used to be in that side, right? And they explained to me how they got over it and how they did it. And I said, that's not easy, man. That's if you can do that, I mean, that's a brutal world. And also to get out of it. And a lot of these guys have done Syria. I don't know about Australian prison, but in the state here in the United States, federal is a little better. State prison, it's a free-for-all. It's bad. You're in some of these big cities like Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago. You better be going in isolation, because if you're not in a gang, you better go in isolation. Only come out 1 hour a day for your little sunshine, walk around a little bit, and that's about it. Because they're going to shank you. They're going to gang. I mean, bad things are going to happen. Bad things. And I'm not sure if that's the way in Australia, but it's you better hope that you do a federal case.
I'm not too sure here how bad it is, but I have seen over there like documentaries and stuff. You wouldn't want to be inside.
Bad.
Prison.
It's not as bad. I mean, because I did a book on the prison gang killers.
Yeah.
And it's not as bad as you look at, let's say, Brazil, or you look at Ecuador, or you look at South Africa, where it's pretty much they don't even go inside. These guys open the gate, you're in there. I mean, have you ever seen the show Locked Up Abroad?
No.
National Geographic. It's you can see it on YouTube, or you can see it online, or what. Man, these people, you have Americans or Europeans, some Australians too. They do silly things in drug trafficking, and you're in these other countries, man, it's survival. You just survive in these prisons, because it's not like you don't have like the rights like you do in our countries, right?
Yeah.
It's a free-for-all. It's an absolute free-for-all. Brutal. So it's interesting. That's a good read too. And I talk about, with that book, you have the dynamics. You got a few different factors. You have the Aryan Brotherhood, right? You have the Mexican Mafia. You have Black Guerrilla Family, and you have other syndicates, Mexican syndicates on top of that also. And they don't like each other. Sometimes they work well, but imagine MA, which they call themselves, Mexican Mafia. They're able to control things from within. So they use all these street gangs to obviously extort, sell drugs. So you think they're locked up, right? They're out of commission, still function like a full criminal enterprise. Even locked up, they're still running things. It's really, I mean, it's crazy. It's messed up. And that's one thing I got a lot of satisfaction 26 years law for, putting these kind of people away. ATF does a lot of gang. We do a lot of gang, and these are some of the worst, most violent people to deal with, because they were raised in the street, and they start killing early, and you want them out of your society. You can't have them there. But even if they're locked up, they're still doing bad, but they'll be a lot worse if they're out roaming the street, right? It'll be execution styles. They'll be doing horrible things. So that part I feel real good. And I do talk a lot about that in my book. Some of the big street gang cases I was able to work up in near Tampa in Florida. It's pretty.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about, sorry, say a drug mule. You get a cartel or something, say if you don't take these drugs through, we're going to kill your family. And then the mule gets caught. Does the government go, yeah, we don't care what they said. You're going to jail for this many years now. Are they screwed like either way?
Yeah, they are. They're in a bad situation because that's what they say. How do we prove that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a hard thing to prove. Because sometimes people say, oh, I was forced to do this. That's they do. I mean, sometimes they pay a way, but a lot of them are peasants, right?
Yeah.
They're coming from South America. They come from these villages. Things are horrific conditions, and that's why I say the cartels. These groups prey on these. It's really, really sad, and they're really violent and sad. I had a lot of cases like that when I was in customs. I think you guys also in Australia, I remember talking, occasionally might get maybe some Nigerian or something that come around, they'll bring in or what have you. And I got really good at that too, because I could smell on their breath, because I was part of that team where they would have the latex, and you have all that latex breath, and they would use like these sports drinks to push it down, like a Gatorade or something. And you get good at it, you can smell it, and you have intelligence also, especially if they come from a certain region, that's prevalent from there. From Colombia or from what other country, and certain ticket agencies, right? They use that's also an indicator, right? So there's a lot of factors that we had to determine it. But even then, if it's heroin and it starts leaking, that's you'll be DOA on arrival. Wow. They're dead. It's not well. And let's say they do make it, and we're not gonna catch everybody, right? There's a ton of them coming through. And if you make it to the cartel guy, right? These guys are not going to wait for you all day, because it's not easy to pass those pellets. Yeah. You need to take the laxatives fast. You need to take them quickly. But everybody sits well with them. And if they're on a clock and say, no, we need our product now, they'll put a bullet in your head, they'll gut you out, and now they take it, because we used to hear stories all the time. Another dead mule found in a little hotel here in Miami. So that's horrible. And I think it happens all over the world, but that's just, I feel bad. And they get used, and not just for that. I mean, these cartel groups, they terrorize these people. They use them any way they can. And if you get caught, and corruption is really bad in these countries. They have the money, they have the power, they have the resources, they have they make billions of dollars. They are so much more powerful than the Italian mafia ever was, right? I mean, I think I was reading about the Gambino family at its prime back in the early 80s, right? It was making about $500 million a year, right? According to the Mexican government, just a Sinaloa cartel is making 12 to 15 billion a year. Because now, that's the Sinaloa. Now you have the CJNG, which is the Jalisco cartel, which is Jalisco New Generation, Nueva Generación, and they used to be allies, and now they're fighting for Mexico and the region and all and they have other cartels too, which are brutalizing each other. So the country is pretty much free for all. I mean, it could be. I almost went to Mexico to work there. So we have offices throughout the world, also in Mexico, and we lost our diplomatic immunity because this president really is not a big fan of the U.S. Didn't like proactive cases being done in his country, right? So I was like, why am I? And they don't even want us being armed. I'm sorry, you don't want me armed. You're not giving me diplomatic immunity. You want me to risk my life so I'm trying to get kidnapped? Or what? No, I'm not going back. I'm not doing that. I was at headquarters. Like I said, I promoted at the end of my career. Yeah. So I went to headquarters, and I got to see how the command staff and director and everything work. And I just saw the news finally. It's been years. We're going to get a Senate confirmed director now, federal prosecutor. So that's maybe good, maybe bad. Sometimes you want somebody who's an insider who understands things, but sometimes it's more difficult with an outsider. You have to explain everything, the culture, because ATF is a very unique culture too, right? You bring an outsider in. I'm talking a little politics with ATF, but that's we are the gun police. Some think we're the premier expert in the world with fire, because we deal with every kind of fire. I mean, we get calls from. I mean, I dealt with, because I was also an international firearms trafficking group in Miami. I dealt with people from all over the world also, and American guns travel everywhere, right? Yeah. I wrote a book about it, Merchants of Death, about how popular American guns are. And Canadians, even though they want to ban everything, Trudeau wants to now ban handguns. The market's enormous. The bad guys, they have a big problem with gangs also in Canada. A lot of American gangs now. Toronto is like an American city. It is really in bad shape, Toronto, and it's getting out of control. Montreal has a lot of violence. They used to be really bad with, as you probably know, if you follow organized crime, with the La Cosa Nostra. Yeah. And how the Italians, how they are. So he might pass it, but Canada, it's a different situation because you're a little more isolated, right? Yeah. Australia, Canada's not. We have a huge border, and I saw all the smuggling going in with weapons. It is unbelievable. I mean, it had one case your audience can look up. I don't remember the guy's name, but he had a Croatian or Serbian last name, and he was a major drug dealer. I don't know if you saw that. The police came across his apartment. He had a cache of weapons laid out, lots of drugs, cocaine, heroin, pills, you name it, laying out in his apartment. And only by chance they come in for another reason and come across. I mean, this is already in Toronto, so Canada already has a handful. So Trudeau thinks banning guns is helping his citizens. He's really setting them up for a doozy because Canada's already in a bad situation. I mean, everything that's in the U.S., it's already over there. And there's no stopping. So, I mean, I think the water helps you guys a little bit.
Yeah, we're a lot more isolated from the rest of the world.
I did enjoy my trip when I went out there. I think I told you about that.
Yeah, tennis.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was awesome. I would love to take my family now and visit you guys. And I was in Australia, New Zealand, and the Fiji Islands almost a month, and I stayed with the different families, which was pretty cool. I was 19 years old then.
Wow. Yeah, you have to do another trip. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I would love to. I talked to my wife about that. Go out there. I remember flying from Los Angeles to Auckland, and that was like 13 hours on Qantas Air.
Wow, it's a good trip.
That's a good trip. Yeah, if I go out there again, it's gonna be another month again.
Yeah, you'd want to stay for a while and travel around, man. That'd be cool.
No, for sure. I enjoy the Aussie people, the friendly, beautiful landscape. I love New Zealand too, though. I enjoy my time. Very green, New Zealand, and a lot of sheep.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how much sheep was out.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard. There's everywhere. I was going to ask you, with the criminal organization, I got a couple of questions. Who's the most violent one in the world that you think?
Oh, I would have to say the cartel. The Mexican cartels are becoming extremely violent. The other groups are becoming. You have isolated cases here and there, but these guys outdo each other. I mean, they're fighting for some of the biggest heroin routes in the world, right? I mean, they are really brutal. I mean, they're shooting down police helicopters. They're taking on the police. They're corrupting the police. It is absolute brutal. I remember, I'll tell your audience this one case, and this is pretty horrible. This was a Mormon family, right? I don't know if you heard about this or not. A few years ago in 2018, they live in Mexico. They've been there for generations near the Chihuahua area, okay? And they were going to Sinaloa, is another state region. They're going to the U.S. visit family, right? And it was just women and children. And they've been doing this for years. They're Mexican residents, but they have family in the U.S. They speak Spanish, and they were caught in a fire trap between two rival cartels, and the mother and their three vans. This shows you how they don't care. She went out in Spanish. She spoke Spanish, perfect Spanish. And she told them, and said, "We're not cartels. We're not involved." And they turned around, lit her up, and lit up her kids in the car, went to the other car, lit them up also. And a third one was trying to get away, lit them up. The car went on fire, and all the children and the lady driving burned alive inside the vehicle.
I do remember hearing that. Well, yeah.
That is absolutely, that just tells you what you're dealing with.
Just pure evil.
Women and children, unarmed, they don't care. So you want to come to how brutal that is? That's brutal. That is brutal. I mean, I could tell you more horrible stories, but these guys just don't care. Don't play. Beheadings, dismembering. There's stories, in police station where police are trying to do the job. These are rural areas, right? Yeah. Cartels are king. They're king. Oh, you arrested one of our guys? Try to enforce the law here? Yeah. So what they do is they terrorize the police because they can outgun them. They don't have handguns, right? Maybe a shotgun, right? These guys have assault rifles, machine guns. They have 50 cal Barretts. They have it all. They have it all. They have their own system set up. They come in and they'll take out the police in the police station, have a shootout, kidnap them, and kill them. So who's king now? And then they have little signs after they do bad things to you. A little sign says, "This is what happens to people who enforce the laws." CJ and send the message. Who's going to enforce the law then?
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't.
What are you going to do?
How do you get volunteers?
You gotta just look the other way now, right? Yeah. Because they're going to kill you and your whole family if you do your job. Imagine living in that culture, huh? That's how they live. That's how, and we have to be careful because if we don't get control of this now, and I've been saying this in the United States, lockdown, we need the wall. We need the wall finished. Because I don't know about you, but I have walls. I have a nice fence around my property. These guys are bad news. They're terrorists. That's what you only can call them because they come to terrorize. You have to lock them. They're probably a bigger threat now than ISIS because they're among us. They're here. Yeah. And they're killing every day. So, and they're right around the corner. So those are situations as law enforcement, which your audience can be aware of, that we have a lot of criminals, a lot of problems. Who's the baddest? They're the baddest. Yeah. They have the most money, and they're not just in Mexico. They've taken over Central America, right? Because they run these guys. Look how corrupt. I wrote a book about this of Nicolas Maduro. Right, he has been indicted during the Trump administration being a narco terrorist. That's the highest thing ahead of a so-called president. He stole the election, and then I was reading the affidavit on the indictment. What a narco terrorist! He's a drug trafficker, and he's stolen Venezuela. He's destroyed Venezuela.
Crazy.
The last 10 years. I mean, the mass exodus, man. I grew up in South Florida, and the Venezuelans have left. It's been a huge brain drain because they're coming, fleeing for their lives, fleeing for new, and some of these have resources and money because Venezuela had a lot of money, right? Because I remember Venezuela, I used to travel Venezuela before Chavez, right? What a beautiful country it was. You know, it was an OPEC nation. Chavez destroyed it. And now Hugo Chavez, and now this guy, Chavez was a communist. This guy said he was a communist, but no, he's a capitalist because he loves making all this illegal money, right? He's a dictator. He's not a communist because communists don't want money, right? They want equality for everybody, supposedly, right?
Yeah.
No, this guy was the opposite. He's on paper, maybe he was, but he loves money, just like Putin or Xi Jinping. These guys are they're dictators because Xi Jinping is very corrupt. All the money these guys are worth, all the secret bank accounts the U.S. found out these guys had in the British Virgin Islands, right? These guys were stealing lots of money. They're corrupt. These people have. And they want control. And I know I wrote that book on China. We talk a little politics there, but I think the situation in China is out of control. I mean, they obviously, the stuff they're doing to ethnic Muslims in Northwest China is genocide.
Yeah.
It's horrific what he's doing out there. Those poor people. Tibet, it's a horrible situation. And if you believe in freedom or your dissent against the communist Chinese party, like what happened in Hong Kong, look at the consequences that happens in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Do you think it's too late to stop China, or is that too big?
You have to. We have no choice.